Gunpowder Milkshake, a movie about 3 generations of women who fight back against those who could take everything from them. At least that's the official synopsis of the movie. And with a cast that includes the likes of Gillan, who you'll know from Jumanji, Lena Headey, who you'll know from Game of Thrones, Michelle Yeoh, who of course you'll know from Star Trek Discovery, on top of Angela Bassett, Carla Gugino and Paul Giamatti, this film has an outstanding cast. And I'll throw some images on top here just so you can see how good visually this film looks. Some of the lighting in the movie is fantastic. Some of the cinematography is also pretty damn good. Now before we jump into the review for Gunpowder Milkshake, I'd appreciate if you did me one little favour. That's jump below this video, hit that subscribe button, maybe even the notification bell too for new reviews every single week. And the trailer for this movie got me very excited for an action-packed awesome movie with some great fights in there, some kick-ass action, and I was all in going into this one. Ultimately, I was out very disappointed with a very poor movie. Now, if you haven't watched Gunpowder Milkshake, I'd suggest, well, do I suggest it? Yeah, I suggest going watching it, coming back and telling me your opinions in the comments section below. If you have seen it, tell me your opinions, of course, down below. And here's my opinion on why it's a bad movie. Now, straight off the bat, I just want to be clear. I am not on a bash this movie type of thing because it's an all-female cast. I actually think that's pretty awesome. But I think this movie, the problem with it is that this movie wants to be so many other movies. Now, it's okay to have homages to other films, but it shouldn't be so glaringly obvious that you want to be Quentin Tarantino through your music. It shouldn't be so clear that you love Kingsman just because you watch this movie. And your main character doesn't always need to be John Wick in an action movie. It's an easy comparison to make in the next 10 years for any action movie like this where a character is trying to get revenge for something to compare him to John Wick. I'm pretty sure I did it with JOLT just last week. But this movie had everything it needed to be a standalone awesome movie. As I say, some of the visuals are spectacular, the soundtrack is pretty decent, and the cast is outstanding on paper. But the movie is let down so much by trying to be other people and also not quite knowing what it wants to be. At certain aspects, it's comedic, over-the-top action, and in other aspects, it's a super serious action movie. This movie is just under 2 hours long, and it's another movie where poor pacing has massively let it down, because for me, I found myself moving around my chair a lot, reaching for my phone, but not quite picking it up because I was trying to snap myself back to attention to keep my attention on the movie, but I constantly had to keep myself motivated to keep watching the movie because the movie wasn't doing it itself. I recently watched a movie that kept me glued to the screen for the full 2 hours it was on screen. But this movie, I had to force myself to watch it. I just kept getting bored, and that's a major problem with an action movie which is supposed to be action-packed. And there's so many stupid things throughout the movie that I guess were supposed to be comedic and just didn't quite work. For example, there's a car chase scene in an underground car park and everyone's driving around like crazy, and little girl is actually steering the car while Karen Gillian's character is using the pedals because her arms don't work. That's a whole other thing in itself. And they go to get away. So they pull this special maneuver and reverse into a parking space, and they're hidden in darkness. So the other guys drive past. But then they show a shot where it's very clear that there's a green car, a red car, and a blue car, for example. And the bad guys just reverse up and be like, oh yeah, there's that red car we were looking for. It's really fucking stupid because one of the previous scenes they were in complete darkness and the car was hidden. All they had to do was turn the lights off and stay low, but they didn't do that. You know, action movie, they kind of have to have action, even though it was kind of stupid, because then this normal car just comes out and pushes another car all the way down to a forklift and drives another car into the forklift. It's kind of just, come on, you're just really pushing, not even just pushing the boundaries, you're breaking the boundaries of reality too much here. And then at the same time, they're trying to be serious in some scenes. You've also got stuff like the scene in the bowling alley where the lighting looks fantastic, but Karen Gillian's about to get into this fight with these other 3 goons who I wasn't at first quite sure why they were going after her because they seem to be on the same team as her. But then a whole fight started. It was a little bit confusing. But the fight only starts after they have a stare down, where they cut back to actor after actor after actor. It goes on for a solid 60 to possibly 120 seconds of just staring at each other, cutting back to the eyes, unnecessarily. It didn't add anything, it wasn't funny, it was a bit like, come on, get to the action now. On top of that, you've got the same thing I talked about with Jolt last week. When there's a character who is killed off screen or disappears off screen early in the movie, you know at some point later on in the movie that character's going to come back. That's very much the case with Lena Headey's character, where she disappears at the start of the movie. Skip forward 10 years to where her daughter hasn't seen her for years and years, grown up without her, holds a grudge against her, and just at the moment that she needs her, she comes back. Of course, very generic, happens a lot. And this movie so much reminded me of Kingsman, to the point where it was almost embarrassing for the filmmakers that they're just basically trying to remake a Kingsman, in that there's this whole secret society and this young person who's related to another person that used to be in the society of secret agents. But there were so many elements similar to Kingsman, but it didn't quite go over the top like Kingsman did, so it didn't work like Kingsman did. It's one of those where you either have to go all in on your comedic aspects and your over the top action, or you dial it back and do straight action. You can't middle this stuff. You can't half-ass it, because then it just looks ridiculous. Maybe I just expected too much going into this one, but on top of that, the pacing was poor. The story overall was pretty weak. They clearly tried to set up for another sequel, which I always hate with movies like this. Unless you're a Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or something that's guaranteed to have a sequel, just generic movies setting up for a sequel is always annoying. They've done it recently with Jolt. Apparently they did it with the Tomorrow War. Now they've done it with Gunpowder Milkshake, even though it's all different companies. All these generic movies, they're trying to create series out of them because that's where the money is, but a lot of them don't need a sequel. What's wrong with having a standalone, solid action movie? Can't think of one off the top of my head. John Wick should have been it. That should have finished after 1. They've gone to like 5 now. Like, what if there was a Pulp Fiction 2? It would definitely take away from how good the first Pulp Fiction was. Pulp Fiction's a different type of thing, but you get my point. Pulp Fiction is considered one of the greatest movies of all time. But if it had a sequel, it would very much water down the first one, unless the sequel was spectacular. And following up on a masterpiece is never easy. Look at The Godfather Part 2. Sure, sequel. But look at the sequel to the sequel, Godfather Part 3, generally considered by comparison. Kind of going on a ramble here now. Back to Gunpowder Milkshake. Here's my question. Why was it called Gunpowder Milkshake? Sure, the girl drinks a milkshake at the start of the movie, and she shares her milkshake with her mother, but what did the milkshake add to the movie? What's the gunpowder got to do with it? Because she doesn't use gunpowder in the movie. Sure, she shoots bullets. It seems like a stupid title for the sake of it. Sure, if the milkshake had some aspect to the movie, like gave her special powers, gave her special focus, it was used to poison the bad guy, that would make a lot more sense. But they seem to just come up with a random generic name. They went to like Google, searched in movie title, name generator, and they went with that and then built their whole movie around that. And even some of the fight scenes are just so ridiculous and so badly choreographed and shot. Some of them were hard to watch. And that's a huge shame for an action movie based around fights and action. The whole scene where her arms are dead, sure, they're trying to do something unique, but you ended up with just a pretty stupid scene. And I think that's the thing with this movie. I'm sure some people found great comedy in this movie, whether that was intentional or not, whether they were trying to make an action comedy spoof type of movie, and I just completely missed the plot. Maybe that's the case. Overall, I've got to say, I was very, very disappointed with Gunpowder Milkshake, and I'd highly be interested in knowing your opinions in the comment section below. Gunpowder Milkshake, what did you think? Was it a letdown, or was it better than I'm letting on? When it comes down to a rating for Gunpowder Milkshake, I gotta say I was hugely disappointed, but it wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen. I'm gonna be generous. Very fucking generous. Very, very generous. And give it a 4 out of 10. So there we have it, another movie review out of the way. And with all that said and done, thank you so much for watching.